The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, the kind that costs more than it should. Tate Birch, 41-year-old senior A&R director at Meridian Sound Group and husband of Lyann Vesell-Birch, held it between two fingers the way someone holds a business card they are certain you cannot afford to throw away. Lyann Vesell-Birch, 37-year-old wife of Tate and former music conservatory instructor, was still holding her daughter's white roses when he pressed the envelope into her other hand. Around them, families streamed out of the university auditorium in the warm June light, arms full of flowers, faces full of the kind of happiness that only happened once. Their daughter Pima, 22, had just walked across the stage to receive her degree in music composition. She was somewhere behind them still, taking photographs with classmates, still in her graduation gown, her face flushed. Lyann looked at the envelope, then at Tate's face. He was not crying. He had not been crying all morning, even when Pima's name was called, even when Lyann had reached for his hand and he had shifted slightly away from her, so quietly that no one else noticed but she had. "I needed you to have it before the reception," Tate said. "I didn't want to ruin her day." The irony of that sentence landed so precisely it almost didn't hurt. Not yet. Lyann opened the envelope. Inside was a petition for dissolution of marriage, filed 4 days earlier. The date beneath the notary stamp was the morning Pima had called them, nervous and excited, asking if they were both coming to see her graduate. Lyann read the date twice, then she looked up. Yara Sten, 26-year-old recording artist currently signed to Meridian Sound Group, was standing 10 feet away beside the decorative hedges. She wore a pale blue sundress with careful makeup, just enough to look effortless, and she was looking at Tate with the kind of patient certainty that told Lyann she already knew. She had come to a graduation she had not been invited to. She was standing where a wife should have stood. Florian Cabe, 63-year-old estate attorney for the Vesell Family Trust, stepped out through the auditorium side door and stopped when he saw Lyann's face. He had known that expression on a Vesell woman once before, 22 years ago, when Lyann's mother had been told her company's original investor was trying to strip her voting rights. That same stillness, that same quiet that was not actually quiet at all. Dinah Moll, 38-year-old closest friend of Lyann since their conservatory days, came through the crowd and stopped too. She looked at the paper in Lyann's hand, then at Yara, then at Tate. Tate straightened his jacket. "I know the timing is difficult," he said, as if he were adjusting a production budget and not ending a 13-year marriage in a university parking lot, "but I think we both know this has been over for a while." Lyann folded the papers. Her hands were steady. Families passed around them, oblivious. "You chose today," she said. Tate looked slightly away, as if her calmness embarrassed him. "Don't make this dramatic." Then Yara moved closer, just a few steps, but the direction was unmistakable. Lyann looked at her, then at Tate, and in that moment, between the flowers and the crowd, and her daughter's white roses still in her arm, something inside Lyann Vesell-Birch finished grieving a man she had long stopped recognizing and began something else entirely. She slipped her wedding ring off, held it once in her closed palm, then she put it quietly in her bag. "Enjoy the reception," she said. She walked it away without shaking. What most people at Meridian Sound Group understood about Lyann Vesell-Birch was this. She was quiet. She had a music degree she no longer used. She attended company events occasionally and stood near the drinks table, and she was Tate's wife. What they did not understand, because they had never been told and had never thought to ask, was that the company they collected paychecks from existed under the authority of Calwell Holdings, a private trust entity structured and sealed by Lyann's parents before either of them died. And the controlling beneficial owner of Calwell Holdings was Lyann Vesell-Birch. Not her name on the door, not her photograph in the lobby, her name in a sealed document inside a law firm's fireproof cabinet that had never been casually mentioned to anyone, including her husband of 13 years. Evander Vesell, her father, had built the first Meridian studio in a converted warehouse in Nashville when Lyann was 9. By the time she finished her master's degree, there were 6 studios in 4 states. By the time she married Tate, there were 19. He had kept her out of the public filings, not because he was embarrassed of her, but because he had watched too many families get dismantled by people who loved the access more than the person. He had said it plainly once, sitting across from her in his office with a coffee going cold beside him. "Protect the crown by not wearing it in rooms you haven't chosen yourself." Her mother Cora had added, "The wrong people will love a throne they can see. Build walls around the real one." Lyann had listened. She kept her maiden name hyphenated. She kept the trust sealed. She kept an archival consulting role that let her move through Meridian's buildings without anyone thinking twice. She let Tate believe her family's assets were modest, old money investment accounts, comfortable but not significant. Tate had never asked for specifics. He had not wanted to be bored by them. That was the thing about arrogance that looked like confidence. It never bothered to check what it was standing on. Suri Nunn, 49-year-old chief financial officer of Meridian Sound Group and one of 4 people in the company who knew Lyann's actual role, had been uncomfortable for 6 weeks before the graduation. The expenses were not large enough to trigger an automatic audit. That was the point. Boutique hotel stays filed under artist development. Wardrobe invoices attached to production costs for a single artist recording sessions. Consulting fees paid to a company called Straighten Creative Advisory, which had no public footprint and no verifiable deliverables. Suri had flagged 2 of them internally. Both flags had been dismissed by Darren Fisk, 44-year-old head of production strategy and Tate's closest professional ally. Systems glitch, Darren had said both times, with the certainty of someone who had practiced the sentence. Suri had stopped filing internal flags after that. She had started saving copies. Prosper Lund, 46-year-old head of digital security for Meridian Sound Group, had his own file. After-hours access logs had shown Tate's executive credentials entering the restricted master's vault 3 times in a month. The vault housed original session recordings, unfinished track files, and production agreements. It was not a space any A&R director needed to enter without a project team present. The second time Tate's badge appeared in the log, Yara Sten's visitor credential had been upgraded without standard approval, giving her floor access that should have required Prosper's direct sign-off. The upgrade had been processed under Darren's login at 11:12 p.m. on a Tuesday. Prosper had watched the hallway footage from that night twice before he called Florian. The call came to Lyann 4 days after the graduation. She was in her parents' house, which was her house now, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug she had not drunk from. The house still smelled faintly of her father's coffee and her mother's garden soap, and she had not yet been able to make herself change anything. Florian said, "There are things you need to understand before you decide anything." She told him to come over. By 10 that night, Florian, Suri and Prosper were seated at the kitchen table. Dinah sat near the window, arms crossed, already too angry to be quiet but trying. Suri opened her laptop and walked through the expense records. The pattern was clear once you spread them across a year. A steady diversion of company funds, small enough to avoid attention, consistent enough to suggest routine. The wardrobe invoices alone totaled over $40,000 charged to Yara Sten's album production budget and reclassified twice by Darren before settling into a line item labeled visual development. Prosper showed the access logs, then he showed the footage. In the hallway outside the master's vault, Tate's keycard timestamp appeared at 11:14 p.m. The camera angle caught his face clearly. He was not alone. Yara walked beside him, wearing a company visitor badge that should not have worked on that floor at that hour. Dinah stood up when she saw the footage. Florian placed a hand on the table in front of her, not to stop her, only to acknowledge what they were all feeling. Lyann watched without blinking. Then she said, "Play it again." She watched it a second time, not because she wanted to suffer through it, because she needed to stop making excuses. There was more. Prosper had pulled a third file from a backup server that Darren had attempted to wipe 6 months earlier. The wipe had been incomplete. What remained was a chain of internal messages between Tate and Darren discussing a young songwriter named Gavi Trask, 24 years old, who had brought a collection of original compositions to Tate, believing he was being considered for a co-writer development contract. The messages ran over 4 weeks. In them, Tate described Gavi's material as the strongest thing to come through the A&R pipeline in 3 years. Then he described, in careful language designed to sound administrative, a plan to reassign the compositions under a different production agreement, one that would credit Yara Sten as the primary artist and list Tate himself as executive producer. Gavi's name would receive a minor acknowledgement in the liner notes, buried under legal language or not at all. 2 of those compositions had already been recorded. One was the lead single on Yara's upcoming album, the song generating early industry buzz for the past month. Florian set his pen down very slowly. Dinah looked at Lyann. "That kid's career." "I know," Lyann said. "He doesn't even know." "I know." Florian cleared his throat. "The company has grounds to act on 3 separate fronts: financial misconduct connected to the expense diversions, security violations connected to unauthorized access, and intellectual property misappropriation connected to the compositions. These are not personal matters. These are corporate violations documented in the company's own records." Lyann looked at the table for a long moment. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. The kitchen light was the same one her parents had replaced 3 times over 30 years and never thought to upgrade. Its warmth felt like a memory pressing forward. She said, "Find Gavi Trask." Gavi Trask came the following afternoon. He sat in the same kitchen chair Prosper had used the night before, a backpack on his lap, the careful posture of someone who had learned not to take up too much space in rooms where powerful people sat. He was smaller than she had expected from his music. His songs were not small. He did not know who she was when he walked in. He thought he had been called in for a legal consultation about a potential filing. Florian had been careful about what he disclosed. Gavi told her what had happened in a voice that kept flattening itself, the way voices do when someone has rehearsed not getting too emotional. Tate had called it mentorship. He had invited Gavi into meetings, then fewer meetings, then none. When Gavi heard the single, he had recognized the harmonic structure, the bridge development, the specific chord progression in the final chorus that he had written in a notebook that he still carried in that same backpack. When he had raised it, a junior coordinator had told him to be grateful for the experience. When he tried to reach Tate directly, Darren had called him and explained in friendly language that going further with the conversation would not help his career in this industry. He went quiet after that. "I stopped because I didn't think anyone was going to listen," he said. "People like him always have more doors than people like me." Lyann looked at him. "Tell me what the songs were supposed to sound like before they touched them." He blinked, then slowly pulled a small notebook from the front pocket of his backpack and set it on the table. She listened the way she had once watched her mother listen to a first-time filmmaker describe a documentary about a neighborhood that had been bulldozed for a parking structure, not waiting for the pitch to end, actually listening. When he finished, Lyann placed her hand on the edge of the notebook without opening it. "My mother believed stolen voices should be returned, not as policy, because a person's work is proof they were here." Gavi looked at her. Something in his face changed. He did not know everything about who she was, but he understood that this kitchen was not what it appeared to be. "Will you protect me?" he asked, "because if I step forward and it doesn't work." "It will work," she said, "and we will protect the work too." Tate did not know anything was wrong until the night before the Meridian Sound showcase. He had spent the week preparing his remarks for the event, where the company planned to celebrate the launch of Yara's debut album in front of press, streaming partners, label executives, and industry investors. The remarks he had drafted began with the word "I" 4 times in the opening paragraph. He had also quietly moved Lyann's name off the VIP guest list. He assumed she would not come. He assumed grief and embarrassment had made her small enough to stay home. The showcase rehearsal went smoothly. The lighting was correct. The stage was polished. The screens would display a tribute reel Darren had assembled, footage of Tate in recording sessions, interviews, production credits, and images of Yara looking luminous under studio lights. Darren walked the room and gave approvals with the ease of a man who believed everything was already decided. Across the building, Prosper spent the rehearsal hour in the AV control room. He replaced nothing, changed nothing. He simply confirmed that the authorized package was loaded, sealed, and protected under a legal hold code that only he, Florian, Suri, and Lyann could access. That night, Tate's phone rang twice. The streaming partner's legal team about an unresolved credit dispute. Then Darren about the finance committee requesting a review of the visual development invoices before releasing the final event payment. Tate told him to handle it. He poured a glass of water and looked at the city lights through the hotel suite window and thought for a moment, not long but a moment, about Lyann's face at the graduation, the way she had not cried. It had bothered him more than he expected, that absence of tears. He did not call her. In a borrowed office at the Meridian building, Lyann signed the final authorization form at 11:40. Florian witnessed it. Suri took a copy. Prosper confirmed the security seal. She touched the pearl bracelet on her wrist. Her mother had worn it every day for 30 years. Lyann wore it now, only when she needed to remember what steady felt like. "Once it plays," Florian said carefully, "there is no quiet version of what comes after." Lyann looked at the signed page. "There was no quiet before this either. I was just the only one carrying it." The Meridian Sound showcase filled every seat. Tate arrived to flashbulbs and handshakes. He wore a charcoal suit that fit the way expensive suits did and moved through the press line with Yara beside him, her hand at his elbow, her smile calibrated precisely for cameras. Darren worked the room behind them. Bick Strand, 31-year-old publicist and Yara's image manager, circulated among entertainment reporters with the phrase "new chapter," until it was traveling through the room on its own. In the back row, Gavi Trask sat beside Dinah with his hands resting open on his knees, holding nothing for the first time in weeks. Florian stood near the soundboard with Prosper. Suri sat in the third row with a company tablet and the stillness of someone who had been carrying evidence for 6 weeks and was almost done. Lyann did not enter through the main doors. She came through the side hall, the same archway the AV team used, and stood near the back wall where the light was thinnest. Her dress was black and quiet. Her mother's bracelet caught the stage light once, then disappeared against her wrist. Tate saw her from the stage as the house lights dimmed. His expression moved through irritation before he arranged it back into composure. He stepped to the microphone. "Tonight is about what happens when you refuse to play small," he said. The audience settled. "I have spent my career believing that the right sound, the right artist, the right vision, those things can rewrite what this industry thinks is possible." He paused for effect. "I want to thank the woman who understood what that vision costs." He looked at Yara in the front row. In the back, Dinah's jaw tightened. Lyann did not move. Tate stepped back from the microphone. The house lights dropped fully. The screen lit up. For 3 seconds, the Meridian Sound logo appeared. Then it shifted. The official legal seal of Meridian Sound Group replaced the showcase graphic. Clean, institutional, unmistakable. The tribute reel did not play. Text appeared on the screen instead. "Before tonight's presentation, Meridian Sound Group is required to address documented misconduct connected to this production." The room went still in the way rooms do when something has gone wrong before anyone understands what it is. Tate turned toward the screen. The first financial document appeared. Wardrobe expenses totaling over $42,000, filed under production costs for Yara Sten's album, reclassified twice, ultimately logged as visual development. The Straighten Creative Advisory invoices appeared below, with a footnote indicating the firm had no verifiable existence at the time of payment. A sound moved through the audience. Not words, just breath releasing unevenly. Darren rose from his seat near the aisle. "This is out of context." Suri raised 2 fingers. Security moved in from both sides of the room without noise. The screen changed. Access logs. Tate's credentials entering the restricted master's vault at 11:14 p.m. Yara's visitor badge, upgraded without authorization, used on a restricted floor. Darren's login approving the change 2 minutes before she entered. Then the hallway footage, the timestamp. Tate's face, clearly lit. Yara walking beside him with a credential that should not have cleared. "Turn it off," Tate said. No one moved. The screen shifted to 2 documents placed side by side. On the left, Gavi Trask's original compositions, dated and timestamped from 14 months earlier, registered with a Copyright Office filing that predated Yara's recording sessions by almost a full year. On the right, the lyrical structure and harmonic development of the lead single currently streaming at 2.4 million plays and climbing. The room understood before the text explained it. In the back row, Gavi's hands curled once, then went still. Dinah pressed her hand against the back of his without looking at him. Internal messages appeared on screen. Tate's own words, "Strongest material through A&R in 3 years. We reassign under a separate production agreement. Sten takes primary credit. Trask gets liner note acknowledgement." A woman in the third row covered her mouth. Tate walked toward the edge of the stage. "This is not the appropriate forum." The audio came next, a recovered voice file from the vault hallway captured by the building's ambient security system. Not hidden, not illegal, simply present in a restricted area where recording was standard practice and where Tate had either forgotten or never thought to check. His own voice filled the theater. By the time anyone connects it to Trask, the album will already be out. There's nothing he can do that doesn't make him look like a grievance case. A board member near the center aisle turned slowly toward the back of the room. Then the final slide appeared. Meridian Sound Group, controlling entity, Colwell Holdings. Majority owner and active chairwoman, Lyann Vesell-Birch. The room turned. Not all at once. One person, then another, then the whole audience orienting the way water moves when something is dropped into the center of it. Tate turned last. Lyann stepped out of the shadow near the side wall. No spotlight found her, no music rose, just the same quiet that had been misread as smallness for 13 years, walking steadily down the aisle toward the front. She stood beside Gavi Trask. That single choice told the room everything, before she spoke a word. Tate looked at her from the stage, his mouth opened. "You own this." Not a question, something between realization and accusation. Lyann looked up at him calmly. I protected it. There's a difference. His voice dropped. You never told me. You never asked who I was, she said. You decided what I was worth. Those aren't the same conversation. Yara stood abruptly from the front row. He told me she was nobody. He said the company was his. The words came out before she could stop them. Every camera in the room caught it. Florian walked toward the stage with a sealed envelope and handed it to Tate without speaking. Then 3 more. For Darren, for Bick Strand, for the attorney who had structured Straighten Creative Advisory. Tate held the envelope. He looked down at Lyann. Something moved across his face that might have been shame if it had come earlier, or gone deeper. Lyann, we can talk about this. She looked at the man who had handed her divorce papers at their daughter's graduation and heard nothing in that sentence worth holding. You chose that morning, she said. I chose tonight. She turned back to the room. Meridian Sound Group is suspending tonight's album launch, pending a full intellectual property review. The compositions in question will be properly credited and compensated before any release moves forward. She looked at Garvey. Your work doesn't go out under someone else's name, not from this company. The applause started in the back of the room. Not the thunderous kind, the kind that starts with one person who cannot help it, and then another, and then spreads through a room the way truth tends to spread when it finally has enough space. The months that followed were not quiet, but they were honest. Tate's executive access was terminated pending investigation. The expense diversions were referred to outside counsel. Darren resigned before the board could schedule a vote. The Straighten Creative Advisory payments were flagged for clawback. Bick Strand's contract was not renewed. The album did not release on its original date. When it did release, 6 weeks later, the lead single carried Gavi Trask's name in the primary writing credit. The streaming numbers did not suffer. Gavi cried when Suri called to tell him. He did not try to sound professional about it. The divorce proceeded without drama, because the prenuptial agreement Florian had spent 2 careful years. Structuring had been signed before the wedding and had never been challenged, and because Tate had never cared enough about the details to understand what he was surrendering before he had it. On the first morning, Lyann came through Meridian's main entrance rather than the side door. She wore her mother's bracelet and her father's watch, and a jacket that cost nothing remarkable. The receptionist at the front desk had worked there for 9 years and had smiled at Lyann dozens of times with the polite warmth reserved for someone's wife. That morning, she stood up. Lyann stopped at the desk. Don't, she said gently. Just good morning. The receptionist sat back down, smiling a different kind of smile. In the private conference room upstairs, Gavi sat across from Lyann with a new development contract in front of him. His hand still trembled slightly as he read it, but this time there was no one across the table with a plan to bury him in the fine print. Afterward, Lyann stood alone in the original Meridian studio, the first one, the converted warehouse her father had walked into with second-hand equipment and the belief that good music deserved honest guardians. The walls still showed brick beneath the acoustic panels. The old console was retired but kept, because her mother had refused to throw it out. She touched the bracelet. The studio was quiet, not the quiet of hiding. The quiet of a room that finally knew exactly who was standing in it. Some people spend years deciding what a quiet woman is worth. Some of them are wrong the whole time and only find out too late, in the dark on a screen they no longer control, in a room they believe belonged to them. The quiet woman walks out of the shadow when she is ready, not when she is pushed, not when she is broken, when she decides. Subscribe for more stories like this, and comment studio if you believe the voice that gets stolen is almost always the one that was worth protecting most.